Morning, all. All right, so news of the day video for all you fine people on the internet to start off today's entries, starting with Toronto news. And so there's been a lot of discussion about Nylander and what he might be asking and the team might be offering, but either way, it doesn't sound like they're anywhere near a deal. However, we may end up with a Austin Matthews contract extension to talk about. So Elliot Friedman, Nick Kyprios, and others have been talking about this in media. Apparently, it might be close to an extension. It looks like it's not a long term extension. And again, for me as a hockey fan, 3 to 5 years used to be a long term deal. But yeah, by today's standards, 3 to 5 years isn't a lot. It means that if you're a Leafs fan, it would delay a potential exit by 3 to 5 years for Matthews, which I think is perfectly fine. I think if Matthews is saying I'll sign for 3 to 5 years and we'll see where they're at the end of that, and if it's still not working, I'm gone. I don't see that that's a big deal. 13.5 million apparently is the likely cap hit, and of course immediately people are like, well, McDavid doesn't make that much, right? Salaries go up. That's how the salary cap works. Next summer, the salary cap's supposed to go up substantially, and therefore, contracts are going to get more expensive. I don't think McDavid's going to be hard done by, and I think he'll probably get a raise when his contract is up as well. I'm not overly worried about McDavid and how much money he's making. And again, if you're Matthews becoming one of the highest paid players in the league, I think it makes a lot of sense. He's a very gifted goal scorer. So yeah, we'll see what ends up happening, and maybe once you have that known value for Matthews, maybe it makes it easier to work on either trading or keeping and signing Nylander. So saying, look, we have this much money next summer, we can't keep Nylander at the amount he's looking for. We're going to go ahead and make a move. There's lots of time left in the summer if they decide to go in that direction. And what happens with Samsonov should be interesting. So coming out of arbitration, Samsonov's 1 year away from UFA status. So the arbitration is today, and whatever gets ruled on, if the Leafs say, sure, yeah, we'll accept that, then he's a UFA next summer, right? And there's a lot of talk about whether or not they might trade out Matt Murray or buy out Matt Murray. The thing about buying out Matt Murray is he may not be healthy. So if a player's not healthy, if a player wouldn't pass a physical, you can't buy him out. And this makes a lot of sense. You don't want to be in a situation with the league where a player gets hurt and you go, well, you got hurt, too bad, we're not going to pay your money, and there's your buyout, you're gone. So I totally get why that's in there. It does mean that Murray would go on LTIR, but it leaves the Leafs in a bit of a tough situation because you can only be 10% above the cap during the offseason, and it would be probably more beneficial to the Leafs to be able to buy him out. But we'll see what happens because there's a concussion history with Murray, various ailments that he's been dealing with. So we'll see what happens there. So Pittsburgh, and again, I know people are probably just of the mind that come on, get it done already. But apparently both Sidney Crosby and Chris Letang are fine with the acquisition of Carlson. The interesting thing is apparently Carlson would stay on the first pairing, and so or Letang would stay on the first pairing, and then Carlson would be, I guess, second pairing. Or you put Letang and Carlson together, and you tell the goaltender apologies, and there you go. Because you're dealing with Letang and Carlson both being older and more of offensive-minded defensemen, right? But both players being on board with picking up Erik Karlsson's big because obviously with Pittsburgh, you want to make sure that, especially in the case of Sidney Crosby, that he's happy with the direction the team's headed. And keeping the veterans happy is important. One name that was rumored to potentially be going the other way was Jeff Petrie. Apparently, he is unwilling to go to San Jose. He has a 15-team no trade list, and doesn't want to be on the West Coast. It's just too far from home for him. So that's where the third party comes in, where you get a team that's willing to take on Petrie's money that he's willing to go to. So we'll see what happens there. And I mean, that contract could happen today, could happen in a week, could happen in a month, or it doesn't happen at all. That's the wonderful thing about all of the Erik Karlsson talk that we've seen out there. Caden Guhle. So Caden Guhle, who struggled with injuries, when he played, he was excellent for Montreal this past season, saying he is 100% healthy after a high ankle sprain. It ended his season early last year. I think the style of hockey that Guhle plays, injuries are always going to be a concern. but he's a hard-nosed defenseman, and you need those in the National Hockey League. So all the best to Guhle and to Montreal, who I think have put together an underrated blue line. Just going to say, I think that defense is absolutely underrated. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Montreal this season and how that defense comes together. Alexei Heponiemi has signed a one-year contract, but not with Florida. He signs a one-year contract with EHC Biel of the Swiss League. So drafted in 2017, only got into, I think, 10 games for Florida this past season. He's 24 years of age. He is now signing with the Swiss League. Swiss League's been busy over the last 10 days, picking up players that are either not under NHL contract as UFAs, or in this case, picking up a restricted free agent in Heponiemi, who hasn't really quite got his footing in the NHL, so maybe a year in the Swiss League helps him, and maybe he comes back for Florida next year, and he's quite good. We'll see. So I saw this morning, and I got a kick out of this because I have thought about doing a video on Brian Helmer. Brian Helmer was really kind of the epitome of a player that just kept going. Even when the NHL dream looked like it was done, he just kept going. He didn't play that many games in the NHL, but in the AHL, he put together a Hall of Fame resume. He's in the AHL Hall of Fame, and he has been named the AHL Executive of the Year. So I thought that was kind of fun. Of course, Hershey won the championship this year. The Calder Cup's theirs, and he's VP of Hockey Operations. So that bodes well for Helmer. Maybe at some point in time he ends up being part of the management structure with the Washington Capitals at the parent club level, but he's doing pretty well in the AHL. The Hershey Bears looking to repeat as champions next year. They now have 12 Calder Cups. That's the most any team's ever had in the AHL. And so I am really heavily considering doing a Brian Helmer video, even though I'm aware he spent most of his time in the AHL, so I'd have to have AHL numbers on the board, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I did a couple of AHL career videos years and years ago, but yeah, maybe it's time to resurrect that idea as well and talk about Brian Helmer, because hardworking, not the most talented defenseman that ever played in the National Hockey League, but hardworking, and he played for a long time in hockey. So Ben Bishop, this is interesting. So normally with just all these other assistant coaches, assistant general managers, goalie coaches, hired as player directors and all this, I don't really get into it. But the Ben Bishop one is interesting. So he takes a role with Dallas now as player development coordinator. Now, there had been rumors he was going to run the player development department. Maybe he decided that's a little bit too much. Maybe he said, I'm not ready for that kind of role. Maybe the team changed their mind. Maybe there's been some kind of a restructuring, or maybe that rumor just wasn't 100% accurate. But he's taken on a role as player development coordinator with the Stars. What's interesting is he was going to work with the Stars last year, but the NHL stepped in and said no. He was under contract to the Buffalo Sabres. They knew he was never going to play for Buffalo. His career was already done. But they had traded his contract to Buffalo to get that cap break, right? And so they figured they could hire him. Well, he's not going to play for Buffalo anyways, but he could not be employed by Dallas while he was being paid by the Buffalo Sabres. Conflict of interest, and therefore the NHL didn't allow it. So I'm glad to see that now that period of time has come to pass, he is officially now working with the Dallas Stars. And that was talked about by Jim Nill before July the 1st, where it was talk about him being the director of player personnel. But as a player development coordinator, which is a little bit different, not quite at that same level, all the best to Ben Bishop. Nice to see him back in the Dallas organization. He provided them with some excellent goaltending when he was there. Just, again, sadly, injuries cut his career shorter than it should have been. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.